This is the most important part, in my view. This is the most important part. Is it possible that we just got a major clue, a major confirmation as to his defense and whether he will in fact be found not guilty of murder?
To the public, Rob Reiner and Michele Singer's 36-year marriage looked untouchable. It was the kind of love people pointed to and whispered about as the real thing. Every red carpet photo, every smiling interview, every polished moment told the same story. Calm, strong, picture perfect. But perfect isn't always real, and quiet doesn't always mean peace. Behind those bright smiles, pressure had been building for years. Slow, silent, and unseen, something heavy simmered beneath the surface long before the camera stopped flashing. Their home wasn't the safe escape people imagined. There were tense nights, restless pacing, and constant worry over their son and Nick's struggles. Arguments stayed behind closed doors, fears buried under layers of secrecy, while the marriage strained under a weight no one else could see. The love never disappeared, but it was tested again and again until it barely held together. Rob later admitted they didn't stay because it was easy, they stayed because walking away might have shattered what little their family still had. Their children became the anchor, the reason they kept pushing forward when everything felt overwhelming.
And we have just learned, by the way, that Reiner may in fact believe that he's the victim of a conspiracy.
That love slowly shifted into pure endurance, and endurance became the only way they survived from one day to the next. It wasn't romantic anymore, it was about holding on, even when holding on felt exhausting. So when CBS filmed Rob Reiner's final interview, everyone in the room sensed it immediately. Something about him was different. It felt as if the weight of years had finally caught up. The confident Hollywood presence was gone. Sitting in that chair was a man drained, worn down by decades of quiet struggle and emotions kept locked inside. Deep lines marked his face. The spark had faded, his voice slower and heavier beneath the studio lights. What showed through wasn't fame or legacy anymore. It was exhaustion. Every word carried the burden of truths left unspoken for too long. The crew didn't realize it then, but they were witnessing something rare and deeply personal. Rob Reiner wasn't there to promote a project or celebrate achievements. He spoke softly, saying he was there because it was time to tell the truth, especially about his family. He mentioned their famous home, the one magazines framed as a symbol of success. Behind those polished photos and glowing walls, he said, were years of silence so heavy it became impossible to ignore. There were long stretches when words stopped entirely, not from anger, but from emptiness. Love didn't disappear, but it grew quiet and distant. Presence slowly turned into absence, and connection faded like a melody no one remembered how to play.
And I don't even care if anyone calls me a Sally, because I'm a snail and I'm never gonna fail. And you know what? You're gonna have to bail me out of jail.
Rob admitted he slowly lost himself trying to keep everything perfect, directing, writing, always working without pause, while Michele drifted deeper into her own world. Piece by piece, the closeness they once shared quietly fell apart. What remained wasn't sudden or dramatic, just a slow erosion neither of them noticed until it was already gone. I thought silence meant peace, but I realized silence can also mean abandonment. The line froze the room. No one moved, no one spoke. Then Rob traced everything back to where it began, the moment his life first shifted. Meeting Michele Singer on the set of When Harry Met Sally changed everything. At the time, the film's original ending was bleak, mirroring the heartbreak Rob felt after his split with Penny Marshall. But when Michele arrived on set to visit her friend Barry Sonnenfeld, something instantly clicked. Rob recalled Barry joking that he wouldn't marry Michelle Pfeiffer, he'd marry his friend Michele Singer. As unlikely as it sounded, Barry was right. Rob admitted before meeting her he felt hollow, successful, yes, but missing something real. He said, "When I met Michele, I finally understood what love felt like." That spark didn't just reshape his life, it reshaped the movie. Rob rewrote the ending, turning heartbreak into hope, reuniting Harry and Sally on New Year's Eve. Just months later, Rob and Michele married in Hawaii in a last-minute ceremony, so private that two strangers served as witnesses. "We weren't just married, we were partners," Rob said. Michele grounded him, giving balance fame never could. Even in their most picture-perfect years, though, small cracks quietly formed beneath the surface. Laughing softly, Rob recalled raising their 3 kids, admitting he was the gentle one who spoiled them, while Michele brought structure and order. His warmth and her steadiness kept their home balanced for years, even as the world outside grew increasingly chaotic.
It is a brutal, brutal crime, and Nick Reiner faces these murder charges with special circumstances.
Michele wasn't just his wife, she was his anchor, the one who kept him grounded when everything else felt chaotic. Without her, Rob later admitted he didn't know who he might have become. His tone shifted when he spoke about fatherhood. His voice softened, almost trembling, because for all the fame and success, nothing compared to the first time he held each of his children. In that moment, he made a quiet promise to always be their safe place, the one they could rely on no matter what storms came. His love was never loud or performative, it was steady, calm, and constant. But even the strongest foundations can begin to shake over time, and slowly, quietly, tension started to build. The silence inside the house grew heavier. The family that once felt unbreakable began to fracture under everything they never said out loud. Rob said the real shift began with their son, Nick. Once the brightest presence in the room, something in him slowly dimmed. Rob remembered coming home late one night and sensing immediately that something was wrong. The faint smell, the eyes that no longer met his. He saw it, but told himself it was just mood swings. Denial felt easier than panic. At first, it seemed harmless, small requests for cash, brushed off as movie money. Nick said he was just hanging out with friends, nothing to worry about. But the requests came faster, grew larger, and eventually stopped coming with any explanations at all. Late at night, Rob and Michele whispered behind closed doors, careful not to let Nick hear the fear in their voices. One night, Michele quietly suggested they stop helping. Rob couldn't agree. He insisted Nick needed them, even if he didn't realize it himself. Love slowly blurred into something dangerous. The house that once held laughter and music became tense and unpredictable. Rob remembered nights when Nick would bang on their door, shouting in a voice that no longer sounded like his own, the echoes filling the halls with confusion and heartbreak.
And remember, when you're adding this, that could carry the death penalty if convicted, or at least life in prison without parole. So the stakes are incredibly high.
One night, everything crossed a line. Nick shoved Rob against the wall while Michele stood frozen, unable to move or speak. "I didn't see my child," Rob said, his voice breaking. "I saw a stranger wearing my son's face." The words landed like a punch, heavy and impossible to ignore. When asked why he never called for help, Rob lowered his head and whispered, "Because I'm a father." He was terrified that one call could ruin Nick's future forever, that headlines would twist the story and brand his son with a label he could never escape. But beneath that fear was an even harder truth to face. Sometimes love alone, no matter how deep or fierce, isn't enough to pull someone back once they've started to slip away. There were nights when everything collapsed. Behind closed doors, Nick would storm off in anger, leaving the house shaken, doors slammed, tension thick in the air. And when silence finally returned, it felt louder than the shouting ever had. "The hardest part wasn't the chaos," Rob said quietly. "It was opening the door again. Hoping again, believing again that maybe this time would be different." When Nick came back asking for more money, Rob admitted he already knew what was happening. He knew he was being taken advantage of, but saying no felt impossible. "I was scared I'd lose him for good," he confessed. He described it as betrayal in slow motion. "Our son betrayed us," Rob said, "but we betrayed ourselves too, because we didn't have the strength to say stop." Fear replaced boundaries. Denial took the place of action. Silence became a prison that trapped them all. Still, Rob never stopped loving Nick, not even when things turned unbearable. "I still saw the little boy who needed me," he whispered. That love became both comfort and curse, a guiding light and a chain. And the more they tried to protect him, the more the family slowly splintered until the laughter finally began to fade.
After his initial arraignment was delayed, it was rescheduled for January 7th, this week. But instead of a standard arraignment, right, where a defendant is told what they're charged with, what their constitutional rights are, where they maybe enter a plea, the arraignment had to be delayed again.
The warmth slowly faded, and Rob and Michele drifted apart, buried under the weight of problems they couldn't fix. Their conversations began looping endlessly. No yelling, no dramatic explosions, just years of quiet exhaustion grinding them down. Love, once their greatest strength, became the center of their deepest pain. "What hurt most," Rob said softly, "wasn't judgment, it was the illusion. Everyone saw the photos, the smiles, the glamorous events, and assumed that was the truth. Behind those perfect images, there was no peace. Tension lived in every corner of their beautiful home. Every disagreement circled back to the same place, their children, not out of hate, but out of love, pulling them in different directions. Michele pushed for structure, limits, and accountability. Rob held on tighter, terrified of losing anyone he loved. Michele needed Nick to face reality and take responsibility. Rob couldn't stop himself from protecting him at any cost. One night, Michele said firmly that they couldn't live like this anymore. Rob stood in silence, frozen by fear, afraid that one wrong word would push her even farther away. Their fights were never explosive. They were quiet, raw, whispered exchanges late at night in the kitchen, two exhausted people searching for a way back to each other. Then came the question that shattered what calm remained. Michele looked at him and asked, "Whether you're protecting our child or protecting your idea of being a good father?" Rob's answer barely came out. "If I let go, I lose him." That single line built a wall between them that never truly came down. Things only unraveled further after one terrible night when Nick caused serious trouble, a moment that changed everything. Michele stood shaking, not just from anger, but from years of heartbreak rising to the surface. Her hands trembled as she reached for the phone. "I'm calling the police," she said, fierce and broken. Rob stepped in front of her, his voice cracking. "Don't, please, he's our son." The tension in the room was unbearable.
And this time, his attorney, well now former attorney, acclaimed criminal defense attorney Alan Jackson, withdrew from representing him. That was a bombshell announcement.
Michele finally broke down, not from fear, but from pure exhaustion. Through tears, she whispered that Rob was choosing their son and leaving her behind. The room fell silent, heavy and frozen with pain. Rob couldn't deny it. "I love you," he whispered, "but I love our child too. I don't know how to keep from losing you both." That night nearly ended everything. Divorce was spoken out loud for the first time. Bags came out, then quietly went back into the closet once emotions cooled, just enough to pause the moment. Rob later said it was the first time he truly believed their family might not survive, not because love was gone, but because it was pulling them in opposite directions. "We didn't fight over fame or money," Rob admitted. "We fought over the children we loved more than anything." Michele needed accountability, boundaries, honesty, and truth. Rob wanted to protect his son at all costs. "I couldn't stand the thought of seeing him in handcuffs," he confessed. Michele's response cut deep. She told him she couldn't live in fear anymore. Both of them were right, and that was exactly what made it unbearable. Rob chose silence instead of confrontation, hoping it might somehow hold the family together. Later, he admitted that maybe he was only stretching the pain instead of ending it. Those fights didn't destroy them all at once. They wore them down slowly, like pressure building so quietly you don't notice until it's already too late. To the outside world, none of it showed. The image stayed perfect. The photos, the smiles, the flawless appearances all remained intact. Rob said people believe what they see, but the real story was far more complicated. He said happiness doesn't mean there aren't cracks. It means seeing them and still trying to stay. He went quiet after that. His voice barely held as he added that everything comes with a price, and he didn't know if they paid it the right way. And it wasn't only Nick who struggled. Their other children, Jake and Roy, carried their own battles, quieter ones, hidden behind charm and comfort. When Rob spoke about them, his sadness was calm but heavy. Jake grew up surrounded by comfort, maybe too much of it. He was smart, Rob said, but never driven. Each time Rob thought Jake was ready to step up, there was always another reason to wait. Rob admitted he kept giving in, believing maturity would come later, but later never arrived. Roy was different, ambitious, loud, and used to getting what she wanted. What began as small, harmless requests slowly turned into constant financial dependence. At first, it was minor help, then rent money, then loans that were never repaid. Michele didn't need to argue. Her eyes said everything. Disappointment, worry, heartbreak, inside a home that once felt like a sanctuary.
So Nick Reiner is now assigned a public defender, Kimberly Green.
What was once a sanctuary had become a reminder of everything complicated about love, family, and sacrifice. When Romy told them she didn't feel safe living far away, Rob couldn't say no.
He folded instantly, letting his heart override reason once again. From the outside, the image of the perfect Hollywood family stayed flawless. Inside those walls, love was being tested in ways no one could see. She didn't ask, she demanded a house next door, private, elegant, completely comfortable. Michele was furious. "Are we helping her or hurting her?" she asked sharply. Rob had no answer, only guilt sitting heavy in his chest. In the end, he gave in. He admitted later he couldn't stand the thought of his daughter being unhappy. Jake remained stuck as well, caught in the same cycle of comfort and dependence, never quite stepping into a life of his own. The house itself changed. It grew quieter, more polished, and somehow emptier. "We'd sit at dinner and no one would talk," Rob said. "I'd look at my kids and wonder if they even wanted their own lives." But what truly broke him wasn't the silence or the dependence. It was the look in Michele's eyes. She never yelled. She never weaponized words. One night, she whispered softly, "We are running out." Rob never asked if she meant money or faith. He already knew. He had chosen giving over guiding, pleasing over parenting. "I was so afraid of losing my children," he said quietly. "But in the end, I lost myself." Every compromise chipped away at him, piece by piece, and still he couldn't stop. His love had become a trap, one he walked into willingly. When the interviewer finally asked if he had regrets, Rob went completely silent. Then he nodded slowly. "I regret thinking I had time," he said. "Families don't fall apart in one big moment. They fall apart through thousands of small ones we ignore." For the first time in the interview, he directly looked into the camera. His eyes were tired but clear, his voice low and trembling, as if speaking to one person alone. "If you're watching," he said softly, "I understand now. I just understood too late." The studio froze. No movement, no sound, just silence. And that silence said more than any music ever could. When the interview wrapped, no one realized they had just filmed Rob Reiner's final on-screen appearance. CBS later re-aired the conversation as a tribute, untouched, no edits, no narration, no polish, just Rob under cold studio lights, fragile and completely real.
Nick Reiner is not guilty. Not that he didn't do it. Not that he didn't kill Rob and Michele. Not that he's innocent, right? Not that someone else did it.
Near the end, the network aired a brief behind-the-scenes moment never meant for broadcast. Rob turned to the interviewer and quietly asked if he thought his family would ever be happy. The man hesitated, then said happiness would come. Rob nodded slowly and set his eyes, as if setting down a weight he'd carried for decades. When the special aired, people didn't tune in for gossip or spectacle. They watched in stunned silence. Rob and Michele Reiner had long been seen as a model Hollywood couple, grounded, loving, unshakable. Seeing the raw truth behind those smiles shook viewers deeply. Many said they couldn't finish it in one sitting, not because it was shocking, but because it was real. Rob didn't sound like a celebrity. He sounded like a father finally facing himself, wrestling with what he'd done and what he'd avoided. That's what made it haunting. It wasn't about fame, it was about family. Sometimes heartbreak doesn't arrive from the outside. Sometimes it grows quietly within the walls we trust most. The media called it a final confession, but to those watching closely, it felt like a farewell that lingered long after the screen faded to black. Then came the 14th. Barely a month later, everything collapsed. The news spread like an electric shock through Hollywood and beyond. The family everyone believed had finally found peace was suddenly gone. Rob and Michele were found inside their own home, and within minutes, the shock rippled across the country. What stunned people even more was what followed. Their son, Nick, the child Rob had spent his life protecting, was identified as responsible for what had happened. Every fear Rob had carried in silence, every question he tried not to face, came crashing down at once. The silence he chose out of love became the very thing that shattered everything he tried to hold together. Clips from that final interview replayed everywhere. I was afraid of losing my child. Suddenly, every sentence sounded different. Not reflection, but farewell. A warning he never knew would be his last. The time was there, but no one wanted to face it. In an instant, the perfect image shattered. That once inspiring family photo became haunting and unforgettable. People began asking how many homes looked just like it, smiling for cameras while quietly breaking apart behind closed doors. And maybe the most chilling part wasn't the ending itself.
And now we're not going to know the reason he withdrew, but we know that he's now got a public defender.
It was the realization of how long the cracks had been forming, hidden in plain sight for years, as love, fear, and denial twisted together so tightly they became impossible to separate. Rob's love for his son was unconditional, completely so, but that same love blinded him, trapped him, and in the end erased everything he had fought to protect. What began as a family story became more than a headline. It became a warning about what happens when love has no limits and silence replaces action. To truly understand the weight of it all, you have to look at Michelle's singer Reiner. She wasn't just Rob's wife, she was a force of her own, a respected photographer, producer, and activist with a story just as powerful as the man she married. Born in New York City, Michele grew up in a close Jewish household shaped by survival, resilience, and the will to rebuild. Her mother had endured unimaginable hardship during World War II and started over from nothing, a strength that became the backbone of Michelle's spirit. From a young age, she learned that silence could be dangerous and the truth wasn't optional, it was a responsibility. She carried that conviction into everything she did. Fluent in French and Spanish, she studied photography at the School of Visual Arts in New York, where creativity became her language, a way to speak truth without words. Those early years weren't glamorous, they were humbling. She hauled heavy equipment, adjusted lighting for others, and watched credit go elsewhere. But behind the lens, she learned how to truly see people, not the image they projected, but what lived beneath it. Her camera became her voice and her truth. By the mid-1980s, her talent could no longer be ignored. Major magazines took notice, drawn to her ability to capture honesty over polish, emotion without masks. Michele wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing truth, and that pursuit made her unforgettable, including photographing the cover of The Art of the Deal.
So, and remember, he allegedly kills his parents, so he's not getting an inheritance. But it always became a question of how can you afford a high-powered attorney like Alan Jackson. But this is the big point. This goes to my other major theory.
It was a project she would later admit she regretted, but it still cemented her place in the industry. It proved she could stand shoulder to shoulder with the biggest names in the field. Then, in 1989, fate shifted while she was visiting her close friend Barry Sonnenfeld on the set of When Harry Met Sally. That's where Michele crossed paths with director Rob Reiner, and in that instant, everything changed. Rob, newly single and quietly rebuilding his life, saw her across the set and couldn't look away. Barry, always joking, teased that Rob wouldn't marry Michelle Pfeiffer, he'd marry his friend Michelle Singer. Unbelievably, he was right. Their connection sparked fast and deep, something that felt inevitable. Within months, Rob and Michele were saying "I do" in Hawaii during a small, spontaneous ceremony witnessed by just two strangers. One of them, an elderly woman, even recognized Rob and warmly complimented him on The Princess Bride. The moment was simple and perfectly symbolic of their love, spontaneous, warm, and real. Michele didn't just enter Rob's life, she redirected it. Her grounded nature, creative fire, and emotional insight reshaped him personally and artistically. In fact, When Harry Met Sally originally had a bleak ending. When Rob fell in love with Michele, he rewrote it, allowing Harry and Sally to find each other again. Heartbreak gave way to hope, both on screen and in his own life. For the next 36 years, Rob and Michele were seen as one of Hollywood's most admired couples. Not just spouses, but true collaborators and equals. They built a life rooted in creativity, compassion, and partnership, raising 3 children,
Jake in 1991, Nick in 1993, and Roy in 1997. To the world, they looked like the perfect family, even as unseen challenges quietly waited in the background. Behind the scenes, Michele remained the steady force that kept Rob grounded. No matter how turbulent Hollywood became, Rob often said she was the engine behind everything they built. Her own career reflected that truth. She co-founded Reiner Light and later became co-chair of Castle Rock Entertainment, helping produce projects such as Shock and Awe.
Maybe he can't afford the experts that he needs to testify in his trial. So this goes to my point. When Alan Jackson says that Nick Reiner is not guilty, right? Not that he didn't do it, not that he's innocent, not that somebody else did it, not guilty. My thought is he's talking about the insanity defense.
She went on to produce projects like Defending My Life, Rachel, and God and Country, and continued working on Spinal Tap 2, set for release in 2025. Proving her creative drive never slowed, even by 2020. Michele and Rob also signed a major partnership with Warner Brothers Television, cementing their reputation as storytellers driven by purpose, not just success. But Michele wasn't only a creative force, she was a fighter for justice, equality, and truth. She co-founded the American Foundation for Equal Rights, playing a key role in overturning Proposition 8 and advancing marriage equality nationwide. Her passion extended further. She advocated for early childhood education, pushed for public school funding, and worked alongside the Innocence Project to help correct wrongful convictions. Whatever cause she took on, she gave everything. No shortcuts, no half measures. Rob often said with pride that she was the force behind everything they built. He called her his true north, the one who kept him centered when fame tried to pull him off course. When I met her, I finally understood what real love feels like. Years later, Michele echoed the same sentiment in her own quiet, steady way. Friends described her as brilliant, compassionate, and unstoppable, a woman who carried both fire and grace. She balanced creativity with conscience, art with responsibility, always standing for something larger than herself. Together, Rob and Michele built a partnership rooted not in image or status, but in meaning and shared purpose. From the outside, their bond looked unbreakable, the kind of love story people believed in. Then came December 14th, 2025, and everything stopped. Their story was suddenly frozen in a way no one could have imagined.
They are reporting that their sources tell them Nick Reiner may in fact know that he killed his parents, but that he's delusional, that he believes that this was some sort of conspiracy that has been orchestrated against him to have him arrested.
Michele and Rob were found inside their Brentwood home, and the shock rolled through Hollywood and the nation like a wave of disbelief. Soon after, their son Nick was taken into custody in connection with what happened. What followed was a silence that felt heavy and deeply unsettling. When CBS later re-aired Rob's final interview, it landed differently. Viewers no longer saw a filmmaker or icon. They saw a father who had spent a lifetime trying to hold his family together as it quietly slipped away. Every line now carried more weight. What once sounded reflective felt like something left behind, cutting straight through the screen. Rob's words weren't dramatic, they were painfully human. His story wasn't meant to shock, but to open eyes to an uncomfortable truth. Behind perfect smiles and polished photos, many families fight private battles no one sees. He showed how love without boundaries and silence without honesty can slowly become the very thing that breaks what it's trying to protect. Rob didn't speak for attention, he spoke because he couldn't let silence win anymore, even if understanding came too late. He wanted the truth to be seen. That truth lingered long after the screen went dark. In the weeks that followed, the world couldn't stop talking. News outlets dissected every moment, every photo, every overlooked sign. Fans filled social media with memories and old clips, trying to understand how a family that seemed so grounded could fall apart. Away from the headlines, something quieter happened. People began looking inward at their own families, their own silences, their own unspoken fears.
Therapists reported more parents reaching out, more families trying to reconnect before things went too far. Rob's story became a mirror, showing how love left unspoken can turn into loneliness and how protection pushed too far can erase trust. Friends said the hardest part wasn't the shock, it was realizing how invisible the cracks had been. They were always there for everyone else, one close friend said. No one realized how much they needed someone to be there for them. Michelle's colleagues later honored her with a tribute exhibition of her photography. The exhibition was called Unspoken Light, a breathtaking collection where each image captured what Michele had always chased: truth, emotion, and the quiet beauty hidden inside pain. Visitors moved through the gallery in silence. Some left handwritten notes, others stood frozen in front of her portraits, tears forming without warning. It wasn't just art, it was a message she had been sending her entire life, that truth, no matter how heavy, must be faced. CBS later confirmed that Rob's full, uncut interview would remain archived permanently, untouched. He wanted honesty, a producer said, and honesty was what he deserved. As time passed, the world began to see the Reiners not only as a family that fell apart, but as a reminder that even the strongest love needs boundaries, that silence can be louder than anger, and that sometimes the bravest act is finally speaking, even when it comes too late. Somewhere inside that truth, Rob and Michelle's story continued to live, not as spectacle or tragedy, but as a lesson carried quietly forward, asking others to listen before silence takes over again. Months passed, but the conversation never truly faded. Whenever Rob Reiner's name came up, there was a pause, a shared mix of sadness and respect. Hollywood moved on, as it always does, but the weight of what happened lingered like a shadow that refused to lift. People weren't only mourning them, they were questioning a culture that celebrates perfection while ignoring pain. Writers, directors, and actors who had worked with Rob began speaking openly. Some called it the Reiner effect, a reminder that stories told on screen mean little if we refuse to face the ones unfolding inside our own homes. Rob had always believed in storytelling with purpose, and without intending to, his own life became the story that cut closest to the truth. Michelle's work continued to spark conversations of its own. Her unfinished projects were released one by one, each carrying raw honesty that forced people to stop and reflect. A final photography series discovered in her private studio was titled Through Silence. Every image spoke of resilience, love, and the invisible pressure people carry behind closed doors. Critics called it haunting and beautiful, the purest reflection of Michelle's soul. Nick's case remained under review, details kept largely private. What little emerged painted a picture of a young man lost between guilt and confusion. For once, the media pulled back. There were no cruel headlines, no sensational claims. The story softened into something sadder, about cycles of pain and how unspoken love can consume everyone it touches. The Brentwood home was sold quietly. Neighbors said the lights stayed off for months, except one night when a single lamp glowed in the window. Maybe a showing, maybe a farewell. Either way, it felt symbolic, a final flicker of warmth in a place that held so much life. Even now, people return to Rob's final words, replaying them, searching for something they might have missed. Each time, the message landed the same way. Love is powerful, but truth is what sustains it. Silence can feel safe in the moment, but it's honesty that keeps love alive. By the following year, the Reiner story had grown into something far larger than any Hollywood narrative. It became a symbol, a conversation starter, a quiet reminder of how fragile even the strongest bonds can be. Universities began hosting seminars on the Reiner legacy, examining how fame, family, and emotional silence intertwined in ways that shaped lives and generations. Psychologists, artists, and journalists reached the same conclusion. This wasn't just tragedy, it was a lesson in what happens when image replaces empathy. Documentaries followed, but none fully captured what Rob and Michele truly represented: authenticity. They were proof that even those who appear to have everything can still be fighting invisible battles. One filmmaker described their story as love colliding with reality, Another called it the cost of protecting what you love for too long. Every interpretation led back to the same truth. Their story was painfully human. Michele's gallery exhibitions continued traveling from city to city, New York, London, Paris, drawing thousands. Her photography felt timeless, even more powerful in its absence. One image became the centerpiece, Rob sitting behind the camera on set, smiling into her lens. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "He believed in me before I believed in myself." That single line brought many to tears. Jake and Roy, living quietly away from public view, slowly began rebuilding their lives with friends and mentors who had known their parents very well. Those close to them said they found comfort in carrying forward their parents' values: honesty, compassion, creativity, not as a shadow of the past, but as a way to honor what was good in it. Friends of the family often said the same thing. This story wasn't about loss, it was about learning. Learning that love without communication cannot survive, that silence is never safety, and that the bravest act is speaking before it's too late. That's how their legacy continues, not through films or rewards, but through a quiet understanding they left behind. Real love isn't about perfection, it's about truth, even when that truth hurts. Their journey wasn't just about fame or heartbreak, it was about love, truth, and the cost of silence. A reminder that even the brightest lives can carry the darkest struggles, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is speak up. If this story made you pause, if it changed how you think about what happens behind closed doors, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and ask yourself the question it leaves behind. Can silence destroy even the strongest love? Every family has a story. Some just never get told.